hear this from my entrepreneurs. That's always a challenge. Like me being a recovering 3-time entrepreneur, you know, it's so much about the what you don't know that it kind of can be the issue. And in my experience, I found working with lawyers who really know what they do just saves you so much time and headache and effort. So I'd highly recommend working with people who know what they're doing. So without further ado, Lior.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Thank you all for coming here. We're just so you all know, this is a law firm. Sometimes people we sponsor things that people don't know what we are. So we are a law firm, a large national law firm. We do a variety of work. In this office, we're pretty much full service, and we've been teaming up with CryptoMondays to get the word out on sort of our connection to the venture space and emerging company space, and in crypto as well. In terms of what the stuff that I've worked on is as the lead lawyer for Civics Token Sale and Properties Token Sale, if you guys are familiar with those companies. We have a fairly extensive blockchain group at the firm. I'm sort of the West Coast representative. We've got a bunch of folks on the East Coast, and we're very bullish on the space, and we're very glad you all came. It's a beautiful day, and glad you enjoyed the food. And now back to what you came here for, these guys. So thank you again.
All right, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay with this? Okay, great. So tonight we're calling this our summer party, our Crypto Mondays summer party. In fact, it's been a year and a half since the first time we did a Crypto Mondays. Andy, is Andy here yet? Well, Andy and I started it in like a little bar, in Chinatown. And we just had some people come over and just hang out and have beers and talk crypto. And then the next time we did it, we had an ad hoc pitch session. A friend of mine who was a venture person, she was talking about the deals she was involved with, and they were doing partnership with who will be the Chinese exchange. So, and it just kind of grew. And so the Crypto Mondays group is based in New York, and now we're in 56 cities and I think over 15,000 members. So I personally run the one here in San Francisco with Erez, is right here. Erez is at Blocks. Andy, who's not here, Yulia and Bill, we're all kind of traveling. So, we put this together. It's just a volunteer community. We just do it to build community and enable people to meet each other and learn and have a good time. And that's kind of why we do what we do. And I'm lucky enough to have a really amazing panel of super smart people here to talk about Facebook Libra and a little bit about Bitcoin. But just for the record, I invited 4 women who are women in blockchain to come, and none of them could come. So, in the future, women in blockchain, when you get invited, say yes to stuff. Okay, we're trying to be helpful here. But in any case, so we'll start from the right and start with Reese and just do brief intros and then kind of move into the conversation.
Hi, my name's Reese, and my background's in biophysics and sort of theoretical side of things. And then I got distracted into internet and internet protocols and how those have evolved. And blockchain is another internet protocol. And Vincent Cerf has a flow chart that he shows in his talk sometimes. And the flow chart starts out, do I need blockchain? And there's one choice, which is no.
Hello, my name is Mark Jeffrey. I am the CEO and co-founder of Guardian Circle, which is a community emergency response network. We have a token called GUARD. We did a $3.5 million token sale about a year and a half ago. Previous to that, I've done several things, but of note in the Bitcoin universe, I wrote a book called Bitcoin Explained Simply in 2013. And then in 2015, after it crashed from $1,200 down to $160, everyone went, "Oh, that's garbage! It's been discredited. It's BS." I wrote another book called The Case for Bitcoin. So, and thank God I was right. So there you go.
Hey guys, my name is Nick White. I'm co-founder of a project called Harmony. We are a scalable smart contract platform, and we use sharding and proof of stake to make blockchain 1,000 times faster and 1,000 times cheaper. We recently completed our IEO on Binance. It's no longer ICO now, it's IEO, Initial Exchange Offering, and we launched our mainnet phase 1 at the beginning of this month.
That's awesome. And just to clarify, Reese wanted me to be really clear about that. Reese is an early person at Singularity, and he's an advisor to Facebook. He's not an employee of Facebook. He doesn't speak for Facebook. He has opinions about it, but anything he says will not get in the way of his work there or his confidentiality agreement. Is that cool? Okay, so there was a little bit of confusion about that, part of which was my fault. I uploaded an earlier version with a Facebook logo on it, so sorry about that. So in any case, before we start talking about Facebook Libra and what that's all about, what the hell's going on with Bitcoin? All of a sudden, it went from $4,000 to $10,000 to $13,000, been bouncing around between 10 and 13 the last month. What's up, guys?
I think this is pretty typical for Bitcoin, actually. I think it was surprising because it kind of doesn't fit into this 4-year cycle with the halving that people were expecting from the last few bull runs. But at the same time, I think Bitcoin is really, and crypto in general, is really reaching the mainstream. And that's what Libra is showing us, that it's entering the international sort of discussion. And people all around the world are now paying attention to cryptocurrencies. So I think there may be a connection there.
Yeah, I mean, from where we sit, it's pretty simple. It's the Facebook pump, at least the latest sort of go around. I forget what it was before because I was paying. I don't recall. I did have thoughts on that before, but now that we're in the future, I've forgotten them. But the latest sort of month or two has been all about Facebook, and then as it looks like Libra may not launch, maybe it'll launch, maybe it won't launch. Suddenly the market's kind of getting scared again. So, and then later, and just more recently, Mnuchin gave some what I think a lot of people think are positive comments about Bitcoin. So it's kind of going back up again now.
Well, so at the beginning of this year, many people thought that Bitcoin was dead, and the other altcoins were deader. And for various reasons, Bitcoin has started going up. But I agree that sort of the Facebook effect, but that has contributed to it going up. But people understanding, learning about what it is, what it's good for, that it's a store of value, that has properties that are better than gold and other things, are letting people see that maybe it's not a bad place to put your money. And some of the fears about it going to zero, people are, after 10 years, people are confident that it's not likely to go to zero. And there are people speculating it'll go to $1 million. But if it did, that would be 70 times more valuable than any company in the world. And so it's about 200 billion now, and it could easily 5x, but it's not necessarily going to 75x. And and after the Facebook announcements, the governments around the world have been reacting mostly negatively, and that might be responsible for some of the going from 13K down to 10K recently.
Yeah, 35x would put the market cap of Bitcoin at $7 trillion, the market cap of gold. I think that's not unreasonable. Not tomorrow, but within the next 5 years.
I agree.
So, what can we do with Bitcoin? I mean, I was just at the Bitcoin 2019 conference that talk about timing. You couldn't have timed this conference more amazingly because, I don't know, how many here have been to a Crypto Mondays before? That's cool. The really cool thing is 75% of the people here have not been to one before, which is pretty cool. I can tell you that as recently as 3 months ago, when the price of Bitcoin was like $4,000, it was crickets. Like we had 4 months where we were putting on great events with amazing speakers, and just not a whole lot of people came. And then all of a sudden, the price of Bitcoin takes off, and there's a lot more interest again in Bitcoin. But like for example, the Bitcoin 2019 conference that was just here a few weeks ago was like packed. It was like I was like, am I Marty McFly? And am I in 2017? What's going on? It's kind of crazy. But the thing that I heard a lot of people talking about was, Lightning Network. Now we're Bitcoin's enabled to be able to make smaller, easier transactions, make it more user-friendly. Is that for real, guys, or are we all selling and talking to each other? Is it like crypto experts who think Bitcoin's great because we know everything about Bitcoin? Like, will your mom ever go out and use Bitcoin to buy anything?
I can see a world where Lightning Network is successful for peer-to-peer payments and does start to fulfill the original vision of peer-to-peer cash. But at the same time, I do feel that the real value of Bitcoin that everyone's discovering is the store of value. And I don't see a reason why people would want to pay in gold, for example. Like, I don't carry around gold with me, or pay the equivalent of gold, or Apple stock, or something that I want to store my value in doesn't really make sense as a means of exchange. So that side of it doesn't make sense to me. And the other thing is that Bitcoin can't do everything. We've learned from Ethereum and other smart contract platforms that there's a lot more that blockchain is capable of doing. And it doesn't seem that Bitcoin is aiming to fulfill that niche. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation aside from Bitcoin, even though it is the grandfather, it is the granddaddy, and the sort of the genesis of this whole movement.
Bitcoin is digital gold. I completely agree with you. It's not anything else. The mechanisms that make it work, if you monkey with them in any way, the proof of work, it loses the magic. It loses its store of value magic. That is the thing that makes it tick. Other blockchains like EOS and NEO and some other ones, but the ones I've experienced personally, when you use EOS to transfer a coin from one person to another, it is Google fast. You know, your fingers lifting off, the coin is in the other person's wallet. That is magic, and that's the sort of magic you need for cash-like transactions. I don't know if EOS will be the winner, but something like that, EOS or one of its descendants will be the winner in that category. But it won't be Bitcoin.
There's lots of ways to do payments, and I agree that Bitcoin is more like digital gold, as you say, in that it's something you store as value. It's not something you use to buy coffee with. And years ago, somebody paid 10,000 Bitcoins to buy 2 pizzas. And they probably regret that now. And the Winklevoss twins, one of them used Bitcoin to buy a ticket on Richard Branson's space tourism flight several years ago. And he says, that'll never happen again. And so by being volatile and being a deflationary store of value, I mean, it's likely to continue going up, spending on anything is generally a bad idea. And so it's a way to keep value, but not necessarily do transactions. It wasn't really even designed to do transactions. So it's likely to stay there.
Craig Wright would say that it was designed to do transactions, and it's called an electronic digital cash system right in the white paper. So I'm not quite sure what Satoshi.
Is that Satoshi, right?
That's the fake Satoshi. I'm going to say it. He's the fake Satoshi. He's not Satoshi. But no, some people would argue that Satoshi, in fact, did mean for it to be cash-like. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that brings us to, well, there's been our last event, and those of you who were at it, was an amazing event about stablecoins, and talked all about that topic and thinking about, how stablecoins can play a role. And it seems kind of like Facebook Libra is trying to walk somewhere in the middle of like what Bitcoin is, what a stablecoin is. Can you guys just give us your perspective, really high level? What is Facebook Libra, and should we care? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it evil?
I don't think it's evil. So my perspective on Facebook Libra, it's a better tether. It does not compete with Bitcoin. It is meant to be a stable coin, but a new kind of stable coin backed by a number of currencies, not just the dollar. Why that's important is because Facebook has 2 billion users, and they can provide a Libra wallet to those folks and enable them to send Libra to one another using just a name and a picture. You don't have to use some goofy crypto address. That in itself is insanely magical. Nobody has cracked that UI yet. Facebook could do it. And Facebook could also provide an easy on-ramp for people to go swipe their credit card, buy some Libra, take your Libra, back out to your credit card again. That piece of it has not been cracked by anyone. That needs to be cracked by someone for this whole thing to move forward.
Well, one thing to put some perspective on it is the the guy, David Marcus, who's running Libra for Facebook, used to be president of PayPal. And 2 board members of Facebook used to be the co-founders of PayPal. So collectively, they know a lot about PayPal and how PayPal works and what the market is, the problems, the opportunities, and how to do it again with 15 years of hindsight, that they can make a better PayPal than ever existed. And so that would be a default bias. You would assume people, in charge of the operation would be going that direction. And PayPal is a payment system and kind of a bank. And so that's where it may run into some trouble, where the governments are reacting pretty uniformly scared or negative, or both. And they're saying, well, if you want it to be like a bank, then you have to be a bank. And that's politically loaded, and there's all kinds of requirements. And so that's the sort of thing that is yet to play out over the next year, although David Marcus has said that they're not going to release Libra until they have government approval in each jurisdiction they're going to release it.
So I agree actually with both of their perspectives, so I won't repeat what they said already, but I think although Libra is in its current form is proposed more as a stablecoin and payment network, I think their ambitions are a lot grander, even if they may not explicitly state that. And there's a lot more baked into the white paper if you read it. They have their own programming language, there will be smart contracts, and with that you can start to do really interesting things using blockchain as sort of a new sort of financial infrastructure. And there's a really, if you follow Ethereum, their ecosystem, there's a new movement called decentralized finance. And I think that they envision, or I think one of their ambitions is actually to create a whole new wave and generation of finance on top of a blockchain infrastructure. And that's way more powerful than just a payment network.
Yeah, and Mark mentioned a really interesting but incredibly powerful point, which is the UI and UX of current blockchain applications just sucks, right? Who here has a digital wallet, like a hardware wallet, right? Who here's ever screwed up a transaction or sent somebody? So, okay, I literally have had a client last year that by mistake sent $1 million of token to the wrong address. And luckily, the person that received the tokens was a friend of mine. And he called me up, he goes, Mark, are you working for, these guys? I'm like, yeah, He goes, I just got $1 million from them. What's up with that? And I'm like, that's weird, because I don't think they meant to send you $1 million. Well, long story short, there's a company whose name I won't mention, and they were putting together the documents for them to launch their tokens, and they forgot to change the addresses in the spreadsheet. And so they said, send your tokens here and there. So the person in operations just executed, and poof, it just so happened that those wallet addresses were from the previous client of this company. And just because the person who received it was a good guy and an honest guy, he's like, hey, I'll just call the CEO and I'll send him the money back. And I called the CEO. I'm like, dude, you better hook this guy out some way or another. But I mean, I was like, out of the goodness of his heart, like, boom, the money was gone. It was gone. So UIUX is a huge thing, and to the extent that Facebook cracks that is pretty important. CoinDesk wrote a really interesting article in the last week talking about how Facebook, their real play is around identity. They're really trying to, in essence, make identity your credit card, your bank account, that sort of thing. And I just wrote an article about Libra being the AOL moment for crypto, right? And so most of you in the room aren't old enough to remember AOL, unfortunately. At least 3 of us up here are.
Please tell me.
Did anyone ever use AOL way back in the day? Okay. So AOL wasn't the internet, right? But people who used it were like, this is really cool. what's this email thing? What's this messaging thing? In fact, if you go to this article, look me up on Medium, and I have the link from my LinkedIn, and I actually have the link to the Today Show segment in 1994 when Katie Couric and Brian Gumbel were like, what is internet? You know, and they were showing the people today saying, look how ridiculous that looks. But 25 years from now, people will look at us and be like, we were saying, what's Bitcoin, crypto? That's just like, what the hell is that? So I think in the context of, you know, how technology is evolving and moving, I personally think, although I do have a lot of problems with Libra the way it's set up, I do personally think that if it makes it easy for people to grok that crypto is something else than fiat currency and enables a bunch of people to play with it, then I think that's ultimately better for Bitcoin or Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. What do you guys think?
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, which is that crypto has a massive UI, UX problem. It's very difficult to actually use it and spend money or send money, or even these decentralized finance protocols I've been mentioning, they're a nightmare to actually use. You have to kind of be an expert in crypto to even interact with it. On the other hand, one of the interesting aspects of Libra, if you look into it, is that there's a concept called holding your own private keys, which basically means that you actually own the assets on the blockchain. If they're on the exchange, then they're not actually yours. They're in someone else's wallet, even though they may be credited to you. And in Libra, you don't hold any of your own private keys. Maybe they're associated with your Facebook account or WhatsApp account, whatever platforms they choose to use it for. But in that crucial sense, it's not true crypto. You're not actually in custody of your own assets. But on the other hand, everyone also who's in crypto knows that holding your own private keys is a nightmare. You have to be really vigilant to store them in a way that's secure. Or if you go too extreme and make it too secure, you may lose them altogether. And I think there's a large portion of Bitcoin that has been lost through time because people just haven't been very good at holding their own private keys. So it's a trade-off. At this stage, I think centralization and not holding your own keys is acceptable because it's about AOL, it's about adoption. So that's their choice, and I think it's probably the right choice for them.
So when we spoke on the phone, we were talking about, does Libra allow you to own your own private key? So we didn't know. I don't believe you knew at the time, right? So you actually did want to look that. Okay, so you're sure about that. Okay, so this might blow my point out of the water, but I'm going to make it anyway. So there's only about 30 to 50 million people using crypto right now in the world, which is nothing, right? Because out of 7 billion people, it's a tiny fraction. Most people on Earth have not experienced the kind of cool joy of owning a digital object in a distributed environment and knowing that it's yours. Your thing is with you, and nobody can take it from you, right? It's like you got your precious. It's mine. Like nobody can take it away. And that's very different from, a bank where they've got your money and, probably they'll give it to you when you ask for it, but they might not. You don't know that for sure. It's not in your direct control. And it's the same with other digital objects. Other people can have copies of those digital objects. So there's something magical about having crypto that most people have not experienced. Libra will give 2 billion people that experience for the first time. And much like AOL gave people the experience of connecting to people all over the planet for the first time, our hope, and I think this is true, is that Libra will be a gateway drug to all the true cryptos out there that come after it. Just as AOL did not control the future, even though they were the on-ramp to the future, others, Google, Yahoo for a little while, Facebook, etc., ended up controlling the future. AOL did not. I think it's possible that Facebook, Libra may be the same sort of thing. Whatever you want to say about the period of time in which all the ICOs occurred, one thing is undeniable. Hundreds of billions of dollars flowed into startup tech companies all over the world in a way that, why did that not go through the angel investing channels, right? There was something magical about the fact that it was based on tokens. The investors knew that they owned the thing, and it was always liquid. They could always, put it on an exchange and sell it at any time. And they didn't have to trust that they owned stock in something in another country that some lawyer hung on to. They actually had possession of it. So there's something about that the world has yet to experience that's very magical, and I think that's coming.
But and there's a dark side to it. I've met a lot of people in crypto for a long time, and most of them have lost some amount of money, either by forgetting a password or losing the wallet or sending it to the wrong place or getting their SIM card hacked or it's sort of like the security of the Bitcoin's blockchain is like a super safe, secure door in a building with no walls. And that there's some elements of it that are very robustly secure, but if you're not maintaining your passwords or somebody can get your SIM card and log in as you, then it doesn't really matter what kind of encryption is being used. They have your account. And the fact that it isn't centralized, that if they do send, if you send money to the wrong place or your account gets depleted, there's nobody to complain to. There's no bank, there's no government, there's no military, there's no chain of appeal. Like there's no court, there's no judges, there's no jury, there's no appeals court, there's no Supreme Court. It's just if it happens, you're out of luck. And so in that sense, it's a somewhat lawless situation. Now, some people see that as a great benefit, but there isn't any recourse if something is going wrong, where in a centralized system there is. And you can appeal to people to say, well, I made a mistake, or somebody hacked me, and they can try and put it right. But at the same time, the people who view the decentralization and distributed nature as a good thing are saying, well, they can't be, we can't be traced for how we're spending our money or what we're spending it on or who we're sending it to or that kind of thing. And one of the historical things is the early days of Bitcoin, a lot of the transactions were somewhat criminal in nature. And there was Silk Road and there was other kinds of things where what people were spending the money on were cross-border nefarious transactions. And so the people who got a lot of Bitcoin in the early days at extremely low prices and now have a lot of it at a much higher price, they have a history, a statistical likelihood of having a criminal activity passed. And so the thing about an immutable blockchain is, well, all those transactions are still on the blockchain. And as the AIs get smarter at forensically analyzing the blockchain, some of that past behavior can be revealed, and some of the chain of custody of, well, you may have got this Bitcoin today, but did it come from some nefarious sender? And so you might be implicated as an accessory even though you're not really fully aware of it. So there's certain things that governments and banking systems and know your customer and anti-money laundering and such things that actually are designed to make it more difficult for criminal activity to happen or be concealed and easier to stop it. So when you take that away, not only is there nobody to turn to for help, there's also you're into a kind of a Wild West world of where it is. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Of the, what did you say, 30 million people?
30 to 50,
yeah.
depending on your size.
So, the early days was a few thousand people. So if there's a few thousand early, problematic people, they're now being diluted into the larger users. But it's still, it's something that is scary to governments, scary to banks, scary to, people trying to manage a somewhat chaotic world.
So, what's good about Libra? Why should anyone here be excited that Facebook basically wants to start a central bank? I'm just trying to provoke some.
He's being provocative.
There's a term, identity politics, and that applies to this. So there's a lot of words like decentralized or bank or yeah. Not everybody is equally familiar with it.
So I'm very excited if I live in the developing world and I've got a phone but I don't have a credit card or a bank account. This is incredibly exciting. So and this is one of the things that Facebook talks about a lot with Libra.
Well, initially it's being presented as a payment system more than an investment vehicle. It's a stable coin, so it's not going to change value to buy it and hold it. And so it's designed to be a very good payment system. And then it has all kinds of other theoretical benefits that are a little bit unclear how they're going to play out. But India has already outlawed these things. China has said, well, we're going to do one instead of support that one. So it's not unresisted. Starting tomorrow are the congressional hearings, first with the Senate, then the next day with the House. And they've already posted a draft of a law that says large companies cannot do this. And so it's,
Large company being defined as?
A large company being defined as those companies making over $25 billion a year in either revenue or profit, I can't remember.
It's revenue.
Yeah, revenue. So it means, large companies run by a certain guy who have a certain character.
Rhymes with Zuckerberg.
And so that it's draft legislation, but they're even drafting that before they even have the hearings. So it's meeting resistance on all fronts. But then again, David Marcus has said, well, they're not going to release it somewhere where the government is against it. They're going to work with the government to try and get it approved.
Well, I think speaking from the perspective of a protocol that in some senses you could think of as a competitor to Libra, I'm actually extremely excited by this because it legitimizes the whole industry. And actually, one of the best parts of when the white paper came out, looking through it, is actually they made a lot of the exact same architecture decisions that we did in terms of our consensus model and the way that we've chosen to scale blockchain. So it actually, for us, was a strong signal that what we were working on and what we were doing is in the right direction. If a big player like Facebook, who has an enormous budget, enormous team, spent over a year just working on this exclusively, came to the same kind of conclusions, then that's an affirmation. And so yeah, and I think if you look around, the whole international political sphere is focusing right now on cryptocurrencies. And that wouldn't have happened without Libra. Without someone as big as Facebook and as controversial as Facebook stepping into this industry, it puts a spotlight on us in a really profound and powerful way that I think will ultimately benefit everyone in the industry.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of stuff that's going on in crypto is just very kind of Western focused. As an example, we use the term unbanked, right? But for most of the world, you're talking about never banked. Like there is no infrastructure. People don't own, credit. You go to China until recently, no one took a credit card. It was all cash. But everyone in the world, regardless where they're from, has one of these. And so I think what I meant to your point, sir, about the central bank is if you really think about what a bank is, it's an aggregator of value, right? The problem is every bank on the planet right now is dumb, deaf, and blind. There's a bunch of stuff sitting in there, and they don't know anything about it. Facebook is the first entity on the planet to own 2 billion personalized, deep records about individuals. And so if you think about what is your essence as a human being, 200 years ago, humans were bought and sold in Western Europe. They still are, by the way, in different parts of the world. But that was your essence, that you had muscles and you could go do work. Today, your essence is bought and sold hundreds of times a day on ad exchanges, and you don't even think about it, right? All the assets that you have accrued through your behavior and through your purchases and through what you've done are now distilled down to a cookie or a hash or whatever you want to call it, and are traded for value across a variety of exchanges that you don't even know about. Like every time you load a web page, if you look at all the different things loading, there's 60 different ad servers looking at your profile and your cookies and making a real-time decision. Now take that data about you and append it with your assets and think about how powerful that entity becomes as a bank. It's not just a dumb, deaf, and blind store of value, of dollars, of gold. It is now a data warehouse tied together with hard assets. So I think by that definition, Facebook for sure is building the world's largest central bank. And they know it, and the other governments know it. And what is the consequence for the Fed when something 10 times larger than them is now printing currency that's cross-national, right? What is the consequence for China to have an entity twice as large as China doing that? And that's what's kind of mind-blowing.
Well,
I was just going to say, just to harp on words. So I read their white paper. The way they prop themselves right now is to pay this company. However, they also say that they want to give people access to financial services and cheaper credit. Cheaper credit, once you use that term, that then puts you into banking. But right now, they're not claiming they want to be a bank. In my mind, what distinguishes a bank from a regular cryptocurrency, I mean, not from a regular cryptocurrency, from a stable coin that's reserved, is that a bank actually creates money. A reserve stable coin doesn't create money.
Well, this whole situation is new. It's our uncharted territory. So it's a little bit like gold. It's a little bit like a bank. It's a little bit like a government. It's a little bit like a lot of things. But the totality of it is not like any one of those things. And so how to navigate that is an adventure that we're all on together, and we're going to find out what goes wrong. But it's not that predictable, and it does impact almost every industry. And it used to be that a currency or the value of a currency was proportionate to the strength of the military of the government that backs that currency. And so that's still kind of the case. The dollar really came out of World War II. And so that Facebook doesn't have a military, and Facebook isn't the only one working on stuff like this. They have a lot of information about a lot of people in great detail, but so does Google, so does Amazon, and so forth. And and it may be that the strength of the military equivalent is maybe they can't blow you up, but they can erase you from the world. And so that might be a more powerful enforcement mechanism than a bullet.
Or they can send their nefarious ads your way and impact the way a country runs its democracy.
Yeah, I think it's about trust or lack of trust in the banking system and the Federal Reserve. And I think that millennials in particular, and obviously people in the developing world, we've all kind of had our accounts put on hold. We've watched as wires take days to go between countries, and there's huge fees on the wires that go back and forth. I think we're all kind of looking at that, going, "This is kind of bullshit. We don't really need to put up with this anymore." I think we needed to used to, but not anymore.
It's not the U.S. government that matters. That's only 5% of the world.
It's the banks.
Yeah,
it's not the government.
For example, Iran is not too happy about being on the dollar standard right now, or neither is Soviet Union or Russia. I mean, it's sanctions are control of the currency that the governments will lose that control as newer systems, whether it's Bitcoin or Libra, come online.
So I still cannot put together what's the value proposition. I'm hearing bits and pieces of what's a bank, under definitions of what a bank is, and I'm not really sure that's what I mean on behalf of what's the theme of today's discussion. What is the
Of Libra?
what does that potentially
So the question is, what's the economic value chain of Facebook Libra? Okay, fair question.
So in opening, if I want to send you money, it should become more or less the easiest way to do that. Easier than giving you cash, easier. No, it is about payments. It's quite a bit like PayPal.
Libra's
Right,
about
that's
payments.
the problem. It's too many things, and it's not specific.
All different tools for different jobs.
Yeah.
100,000.
Three.
Right, but their initial application is moving money. In fact, the programming language for their blockchain is called Move. And so if I wanted to send you money, I just find your identity and drag and drop it. Well, so even if it's better in India, it's illegal. It's like cocaine. So it may be good, but
Yeah, look, let's talk about it afterwards. I think. Yeah, but
How would they make it
they're just saying possession or use of this cryptocurrency is illegal. So if you're a bank and like if I send money to you and then you go and try and deposit it in the bank, they say we cannot do that because it's against the law in our country.
So this actually brings up two things that I want to touch on really quickly, which is that Facebook is actually a centralized company. So unlike Bitcoin, in which you can try to make it illegal, but it's virtually impossible to actually stop it, because all you need is an internet connection, or not even an internet connection, because now blockchain has a satellite in space that is listening for transactions, so you can even use like radio. But with Facebook and Libra, it's centralized. There's 100 entities that are supporting it, and those are real things that can be persecuted in court of law and can be like stopped. So in some ways, real crypto is much harder for governments to fight, whereas crypto in this incarnation is centralized and therefore more vulnerable for governments to step in and stop.
And that's a great point. I just want to ask this question. A lot of blockchain purists are like, "Oh, Libra isn't real crypto because it's not really decentralized, and people have to pay $20 million for nodes, and there's no staking. All these kind of geeky things that we know about in the blockchain world. Does that matter?"
Now it's software and it performs a function, and if it performs the function that you want and you're happy with it, then that's successful. You don't need to know, is this in object-oriented programming code or threaded programming code? Most people wouldn't even know the difference, and it doesn't matter. It's like, does this work reliably? Is it hackable? Is it safe? Is it legal? But you can have things, digital things, that are illegal just because the government says so. Pornography is an example. That the government just says, that's illegal. It doesn't mean they can stop it, but it's just policy.
So in Africa, people started trading with one another using M-Pesa phone minutes as currency because it was, everyone had phones. It had value, and everyone just agreed that, sure, I'll give you 3 cows and give you, 120 minutes. And that just arose out of nowhere because of the convenience of digital payments. So cryptocurrency is very much like that. It just sort of, thought of from the beginning as being a currency. Without a crypto, you would have to go through a bank in order to have any sort of digital currency, right? So banks are a pain in the ass, as we've been talking about this whole time. The alternative is cash. And cash, if you have a bunch of it, you have to put it in a bag. It's, you have to carry it around. It's clunky, right? It could catch on fire. So you want a digital asset, but the only way to have a digital asset other than crypto is to go through a bank and use a credit card of some sort. So barring that, crypto is the only solution.
So Mark, why are Visa and why are the other credit card companies wanting to play with Libra? I mean, you'd think that...
I don't think they want it. I think they're going, holy shit, we better get in front of this thing or it's going to eat us alive. And I think they're right, but that's what they're doing. They're not really happy about it.
And I also think I wouldn't call Libra a cryptocurrency. I would call it a blockchain-powered payment network, which there's a big distinction there, which is that it's a stable coin, and just the back end that's doing the settlement is powered by blockchain. There's no actual digital asset. Although actually there is a Libra investment token, or so it's like LIT. There is a token behind it, which I guess is sort of like gives you a right to be one of the payment processors. But that may be a cryptocurrency in some sense.
Yeah, and I just got pitched a security token based on Libra that I sent you guys today. I'm like, what? Okay.
So then, could any of you answer, why does it sound like the biggest scam that Facebook has come up with?
I don't think it is a scam. Yeah.
Well, so let me just ask you this. So,
Do you know the term confirmation bias? Like, if you assume a company is inclined to do scams, then you'll see that. If you assume that they have good intention, then you'll see that.
so I mean, one of the big issues. Well, I'm sorry. So one of the big issues with Facebook, of course, over the years has been trust. Has been your digital information. Are they guardians of that information in a trustworthy way? And a lot of people obviously don't think so. And then, EOS, totally distributed, super fast cryptocurrency, a month ago announces the Facebook killer with its voice network, right, which is a social network, totally decentralized, where you own your own data. You think people will be excited about it? And, week after Libra gets announced. But why are people not paying more attention to that? I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool innovation. Shouldn't people be like, well, Facebook isn't any good, I'm all running the voice? I don't know how much uptake voice had.
Well, it's not obvious. So, I mean, I was going to say a lot of the reasons. I mean, I think voice sounds interesting, but all EOS showed was a bunch of Photoshop pictures and kind of pointed at them, going, "Yeah, we're going to kill Facebook." And we all kind of went, "Really?" And I think there was a lot of disappointment from EOS or from all of the audience that EOS did not do more to provide utilities and tools for people who are making applications on top of EOS. Instead, they decided to try to, kill Facebook. So, I think most people don't give a shit about the whole, Facebook is evil thing. 90% of humans don't care. They're there, and that's it.
As far as there's a problem with putting social networks on blockchains, in that the blockchains usually are immutable, meaning once something is written there, you can't get rid of it. And Europe has a regulatory policy of the right to be forgotten. So if you've been convicted of a crime, you can actually appeal to say, I want that crime downranked in Google and Facebook because I have a right to be forgotten. Well, if it's on a blockchain, you can't erase it. It's there. And if it's a terrorist thing or other thing nasty that Facebook or Google or Twitter or whatever would delete, well, you can't. It's there. And so these kind of things, the assumption that feature of immutability is going to make a successful social network is yet to be proven.
So at Harmony, one of the things we really believe in is that people in the future should have sovereignty over their own data. And that's something that I think Web3, as a new architecture for the internet, it allows for decentralized storage and decentralized coordination. So you can actually have a platform like Facebook. I think the voice is actually in the right direction. It's just far, far, far too early. I think maybe in 10 years we might see adoption of alternative social networks in which individuals retain sovereignty of their data and can even monetize it. There's an idea of data as labor. If anyone's read the book Radical Markets by Glenn Weil, there's some really interesting thoughts in there. And we believe that in the future people will consider data as something that is core to their own value. Sort of like what you were saying, appending all that data to the hard assets. I think the data itself is a hard asset, and individuals should be able to control it. And it's interesting that Facebook isn't, I don't know, maybe they are considering that they may be disrupted themselves in that avenue, but it's something that will take a while to actually materialize.
So awesome. Now we have some time for some questions, and look for this young man here in the blue shirt who will bring a microphone to you. We appreciate if you ask the question on the microphone so we get it on the live cast and recording. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. My first question is about stability and predictability of the crypto. Once it becomes widely used around the world, how can we effectively control and stabilize the value of the crypto? Whereas we experience many failures of the central banks around the world. So that is my first question. Second question is related to macroeconomy. When it comes to trade wars, the president of the country is arguing many countries, especially in Asia, are manipulating their FX rate. And once the cryptocurrency is more widely used for payment system, one country to the other, and then it can be also possible to be linkage to the FX rate. When a person purchases a product from Kenya, from US, and then he pays, and then once he or she receives the money in US, he or she has to transfer it into fiat to pay for rent or whatever he or she wants to spend. And so my question is quite related to the first one. So the trade war is about the manipulation of the currency for each currency to accomplish their goal, to maximizing their export with a competitive price, and which is actually a very idiosyncratic point in each country. But if the only one currency is dominating the entire world, and then how can you make sure the translation ratio it becomes optimal and fair for all countries? So, I mean, I'm more concerned about the
It's not
manipulation
possible.
behind the thing.
It's not possible.
All right, guys.
Yeah, sorry for the...
It's not possible to be optimum for all countries.
Yeah, and then some countries might be victims, while other countries might benefit from one currency. Who might have to dominate the ratio of the translation from William?
Traditionally, the one with the strongest military wins.
Oh yeah, that should be right answer. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Yes, Rachel. Yeah.
Thank you. Great panel.
And let's keep it short.
Sure. Question: could you speak to the association, the role of the association, the Libra Association, and also its domiciling in Switzerland? How does that relate to? Because we tend to think of this as Facebook Libra, but this association looms fairly large as an entity in this.
Well, according to the white paper and the announcements, Facebook will own 1/100th of the voting rights for the Libra Foundation, which is based in Switzerland, which is notoriously friendly to global banking. And so it's technically a separate entity that Facebook is getting it started, and the participants in those 100 sort of founding entities in the Libra are each putting in $10 million, so $1 billion of capital to get it started, and then it'll operate more like a nonprofit than being some subsidiary of Facebook. It doesn't mean Facebook doesn't have undue influence, but it's intended to be in a neutral jurisdiction, Switzerland, with a committee-type management structure that hopefully is not scary to any country or people who might be scared about it.
I was just going to add to that. So in the year 2017, when all of us were doing token sales, the good actors included, we domiciled we had a regular company in the United States, and then our coin company we domiciled somewhere else in the world, usually British Virgin Islands or Gibraltar, Switzerland, because the United States taxes and legal reasons, it was just a lot less risky to put it somewhere else other than the United States. And we wrote white papers, and a lot of people looked at us and said, "Oh, look at you people going to Zug like Bond villains. Like, what do you guys? You're like international criminals." And we studied and we had very reputable lawyers telling us, "No, this is the way you should do it," and it's just smarter. And when we saw that Facebook did it exactly the same way we did it, I think a bunch of us were actually rather impressed. We were like, oh wow, they're doing it. They discovered what we did. So I actually applaud Facebook for the way in which they crafted things.
Hi guys, thank you very much for the panel. A question, or what I would like to hear from your opinion, is there like an expiration date for cash money, paper money? And if so, what? When would this be, and what could accelerate this process?
Yeah, that's a prediction question. I'll bite. I think paper money's got a 5-year horizon, and that's it.
In some countries, France, for example, they retire their paper currency and issue a new currency. They did this about 20 years ago, where some people had garbage bags full of cash in their basement, and either they would lose its value on a certain date, or they had to convert it into the new currency and thus enter back into the banking tax system. So that may happen to paper money generally. That you could keep it in a suitcase under your bed, or you could put it back in the system.
I mean, you don't have to go very far actually to see. You go to countries where the paper money almost doesn't exist, like parts of China. Everyone just runs on WeChat Pay or Alipay. So I think as far as physical money, everything's going digital. But the more interesting question is what's going to happen to fiat money. And I don't really have an answer. If fiat money does eventually go away, it'll take a long time. And if there'll still be some sort of governing body, I don't think everything will be completely decentralized and only be Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
Just to add on, but we just talked about like countries like India, right, where a lot of cash money, paper money, what I just meant, is like the money to pay with. So this was to.
Well, the example of China is that now most people have a phone, and most people have either WeChat or Alipay, which both are very good at making payments digitally. And so there's now more and more vendors who refuse to take cash at all. So if you want to participate in the economy, the shops and Ubers and even giving money to street people, they have a little barcode thing and that's preferable to cash for all concerned. Now the people in the U.S. are afraid that this is being woven into the social credit score in China, where your behavior and your social conduct is part of your standing in society, and you get a credit score that is, are you a good person or a not so good person? And a not so good person, they can't get on an airplane, they can't get on a 5-speed train, they can't buy a house, they can't go to the best schools, that kind of thing. So it's something that's an important part of life to live there. So to have a good credit score, you have to be in the payment system and in the database, or else you won't have any credit score at all, which is a bad credit score. And so the Americans look at that and go, that's crazy, that we would hate that. But most Chinese people like it. They say, it's widely supported there because people perhaps rightly believe it makes society safer, and that the good and the bad can be identified. And so that, in a way, is kind of drifting into the U.S. We have credit scores, which determine many of the same things. They've just changed the TSA security that won't only happen at airports, but it'll be for sports venues and other kinds of things where your identity is more rigorously verified before you can pass through to things that might be attractive. And so it's kind of inevitable that the internet is collecting more of this data, and more of this data is being used by governments doing what the people are asking for, which is make it safer.
That's not safer. Raise your hand. Ask questions.
Hi. Do any of you actually really, truly believe that Libra will see the light of day? I mean, no government wants it. It's pretty trivial to stop. How does it actually?
That's a
become
really good
thing?
question. I've been asking myself that question the last 2 weeks. I mean, 2 weeks ago I was like, oh my God, there's no version of the world that doesn't include crypto because of Libra. And then over the last 2 weeks, that very quickly became, oh my God, Libra might not ever launch. And I honestly don't know. I think Facebook is very, very serious about this. So I don't think they're going to give up easily. I think their partners more or less could care less. But I think Facebook is, that they want to own this. They see this as their next big growth. This may be the biggest thing they've ever done. So I think they're not going to give up easily.
Like the more they want it, the more governments don't want them.
But at the same time, Mark, we think about our friend Crystal Rose, who her vision of the Sense chat app was basically decentralized messenger, including a wallet in it and enabling crypto payments to everyone, right? So like her vision that she articulated a year or more ago was basically what Facebook's kind of end game is. What happened to Sense, and is that still going along? Do people want a service like that?
So I think to go off of that point, I think if Facebook does launch, it may be by playing their regulatory arbitrage game. Basically, I mean, Bank of England has said that they are willing to work with Libra and are excited to work with it. So maybe it's a way of playing countries against each other. And maybe, if the US dollar gets left out of Libra, then the US is at a disadvantage. So it'll be very interesting, but I think it'll be a long process and very difficult. But so Libra may be too big, but let's take an example of Telegram, which is not at all the scale of Facebook, but still, I don't know, a few 100 million users, and they also have a upcoming blockchain and payment network. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, whether they go the stablecoin route or something similar to Libra, and whether they're big enough for governments to actually care and try to squash them.
And who do you trust more, the Russians or Zuck?
Good question.
Depends, absolutely.
Hi, thank you guys for coming here. My question is about the partners of the Libra project. What do you think about it? Creating a coalition of 100 companies. Andreessen Horowitz put 3 more companies that they invested in. Mark Andreessen is in the board of Facebook. Are we trying to create a sort of government?
Well, no, I think it mirrors what you see in the broader crypto space, where Bitcoin has miners, right? Anybody can mine, but now it's become the sort of thing where you have to have money and to have processing power to mine effectively. So that's not very democratic. EOS then came out with proof of stake voting, but we all know that everyone's paying each other off, and largely it's a bunch of block producers in China, right? So again, it didn't really work out that well. What's that? Yeah. So just getting the punchline. So Libra said, well, you know what? We're going to be dictators because we're basically making our own Tether-like thing, and we're going to basically decide who is going to be validators, not block producers, in the Libra universe. And they invited Uber and Visa and Mastercard and a bunch of big names in there. So I think it's good that it's not they're not trying to go it alone. I think it's good that they have a lot of different partners.
Right, but one big issue in like why I want to be a block producer for EOS or Bitcoin or whatever is because I'm getting coins that are going to increase in value. So there is no value for someone to be a block producer.
Not yet, but I mean, if you're there at the ground floor, look, there's no more making money than money itself. Banks have proven this, and if you are money, and if you're a partner in this new money, you're gonna make money. The 10 million is tiny to pay to get in.
Perhaps tangential, but if you think about the payment systems, there's Google Pay and Samsung Pay and Apple Pay and Amazon Pay, and all of these already exist, and those will become increasingly prevalent in addition to Libra. So Libra's not in a vacuum, and it's just the kind of first big one out there. And the thing to remember is Google was, I think, the 9th search engine on the internet. And, can anybody remember the first 8? Probably not. And so there's a lot of...
Northern Lights, baby. Northern Lights.
But as far as the crypto stuff that already exists, there's a lot of experiments by startups mostly saying, well, we're going to ideologically do this or do that or whatnot. And none of those may matter when the trillion-dollar companies start entering this market in a big way.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, what do you envision could stop Libra being an on-ramp for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? Whether Facebook blocking it or governments blocking it, what could be an obstacle to Libra being an on-ramp for real crypto?
Well, so Libra is a payment system, and Bitcoin, if that's real crypto, is a store of value. Those are two different functions, and you can move from one to the other, but they're not directly competing with each other. So I wouldn't say that people will start on Libra and then move all their money to Bitcoin. Because, like we already talked about, the volatility of Bitcoin makes it not a very good payment system.
Yeah, I think a big potential roadblock in all of this stuff is a world regulatory body called FATF. Have you ever heard of it? FATF, Financial Action Task Force. So, and this is basically, it's not a legal body. It is a consortium of banks and governments who together define who the bad actors are in order to prevent terrorism and money laundering and all that kind of stuff. So they recently met about a week and a half ago in Japan at the G20. They had a thing called the V20. Mark Pesce was actually the master of ceremonies at that and gave the keynote. And we were all a little scared because we didn't know whether FATF was going to say, you know what, all you exchanges, the exchanges are really the choke point. So where fiat dollars turns into crypto and crypto turns back into actual dollars again, if you chop that off, the whole thing probably dies. So there was some fear that FATF was going to come out and say, anyone who runs a centralized exchange, stop now, it's all over until we can get our arms around this. And instead what came out was, look, we're totally cool with what you're doing. We know that crypto is the future. There's no question in anybody's mind about that. We just want to be able to stop terrorism, so we need you to do better at KYC and some AML things. We need to together figure out how we're going to stop the bad people from doing the bad things. And everyone kind of went, oh, okay, that sounds totally reasonable. So, but if somebody wanted to be, if a government really wanted to kill this thing, that would probably be the choke point that they'd go after.
Hey, I'm Chelsea Rustrom with Blockchain for Good. I feel like values are actually getting lost in this conversation. When we were talking about WeChat and credit scores earlier, it seemed like we were talking about all of this becoming an inevitability in terms of how human beings are treated and how we do safety, as if that's going to make us safer and not be completely exclusionary and unethical. So I'm curious what you guys think about the ethical components of the future of cryptocurrency and identity, maybe even specifically as it relates to Libra. Libra is not cryptocurrency.
Well, so the semantics aside, as the planet becomes a multicellular organisms like people have immune systems, and the immune systems are there to exterminate misbehaving cells, whether it's a cancer or an infection or whatnot. And so the inevitability of that evolving for the planet is high, and that the bulk of the cells will survive if the immune system wipes out the ones that are causing the problem. Now, lots of misuse can happen in a system like that, but it seems inevitably likely by biological evolution that this is going to happen to the planet. And it's not necessarily a ethical dilemma, it's just a phase of evolution.
All right, we're going to take a couple more questions, but before that, will you please look on or under your chairs for this little half sheet of paper? Yeah, we're gonna drop them to your. If we need a Libra language, we do that. If while you're listening or at the end, if you could just give us some feedback on here and scores and that sort of stuff, and then just drop it on the table or hand it to this nice young gentleman up front, who happens to be my son, by the way. Say hi, Adrian. And yeah, it's part of the summer job. So if you could just give us some feedback, that'd be really great. We'd appreciate it. We'll do 2 more questions, then we got some more wine and fun and hangout time. You guys can talk directly with the panelists, and then we got to be out of here. I think by 8, maybe a little later. We'll see. But yes, sir.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that I think it's very dangerous that we're talking about something like Libra and Calibra, the closed source wallet that Facebook's building, in this light. And if anyone wants to learn about why it's very dangerous, you can come grab me after.
So silence is safety?
My question,
it's better to talk about things than not.
My question is about secondary market with the Libra. So is anybody knows will be secondary market? And if will be, what exchanges could be in the role of exchanges Libra to like dollar Libra to like maybe United States dollars from the JP Morgan, yen and so on?
So if you're right, and end users cannot own their private keys, how can any secondary markets even exist? Can you see how that? I can't figure out how that would work. I think that can't happen unless there's an API to Calibra or something. It's effectively a centralized system if you don't have your own private keys.
But what will be the value for the cryptocurrency ecosystem if it will not be breached? There are new people to the cryptocurrency like liquidity. So why we are gathering here?
Assuming that every pays a dividend. How do you know?
That's a good question.
So my understanding of the way that Libra makes money is basically they run a money market fund with all of the assets under management, basically. So let's say that there's $100 billion worth of Calibra or whatever there. They're buying bonds or whatever else and getting a small yield on that per annum, and then that is spread between the.
So they're gambling with depositor money.
Not, I mean, this is a standard practice with banking.
I know.
So.
Again.
But I don't know, to answer your question, I'm not really, I don't know, I wonder if the broader crypto community will embrace Libra or not. Like, will the Binances of the world want to list Libra as a token? I would think so. But I don't know, only time will tell. Yeah.
All right, guys, I think we're going to take one more question and then hang out back there and chill and enjoy the beautiful sunset, and we can talk some more afterwards.
Yes, to your point in the very beginning of like, do you need a blockchain? No. Why do we need a blockchain here with Libra? We were talking about Google Pay, all these different these wallets that are already in existence. Why do we need a blockchain to do this?
They've announced that they're starting out in a somewhat centralized management approach, and that their intention is to make it more decentralized in the future. And so they're starting with an architecture that allows that to happen.
So if you read the technical white paper, there are no blocks. So they don't call them block producers, they call them validators. There's no concept of a block in Libra. There are transactions that are validated by validators. So it's not a blockchain.
All right, guys, I want to give a big hand to our amazing panelists. Adriel, just wave this out so you can pick them up or drop them at the table on your way out. And come join us in the back for some more drinks, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.